Book 2, Chapter 8 of Resurrection. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Recording by David Cole, Medway, Massachusetts. Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Louise Maud. Book 2, Chapter 8. God's Peace in the Heart. When Nekhludoff returned, he found that the office had been arranged as a bedroom for him. A high bedstead, with a feather bed and two large pillows, had been placed in the room. The bed was covered with a dark red, double-bedded silk quilt, which was elaborately and finely quilted, and very stiff. It evidently belonged to the trousseau of the foreman's wife. The foreman offered Nekhludoff the remains of the dinner, which the latter refused, and, excusing himself for the poorness of the fare and the accommodation, he left Nekhludoff alone. The peasant's refusal did not at all bother Nekhludoff. On the contrary, though as Kuzminsky his offer had been accepted, and he had even been thanked for it, and here he was met with suspicion and even enmity, he felt contented and joyful. It was close and dirty in the office. Nekhludoff went out into the yard and was going into the garden, but he remembered, that night, the window of the maidservant's room, the side porch, and he felt uncomfortable, and did not like to pass the spot desecrated by guilty memories. He sat down on the doorstep, and breathing in the warm air, balmy with the strong scent of fresh birch leaves, he sat for a long time looking into the dark garden, and listening to the mill, the nightingales, and some other bird that whistled monotonously in the bush close by. The light disappeared from the foreman's window. In the east, behind the barn, appeared the light of the rising moon, and sheet lightning began to light up the dilapidated house, and the blooming, overgrown garden more and more frequently. It began to thunder in the distance, and a black cloud spread over 1/3 of the sky. The nightingales and the other birds were silent. Above the murmur of the water from the mill came the cackling of geese, and then in the village and in the foreman's yard the first cocks began to crow earlier than usual, as they do on warm, thundery nights. There is a saying that if the cocks crow early, the night will be a merry one. For Nekhludoff the night was more than merry. It was a happy, joyful night. Imagination renewed the impressions of that happy summer which he had spent here as an innocent lad, and he felt himself as he had been not only at that, but at all the best moments of his life. He not only remembered, but felt as he had felt when, at the age of 14, he prayed that God would show him the truth, or when as a child he had wept on his mother's lap when parting from her, and promising to be always good, and never give her pain. He felt as he did when he and Nikolenka Ertenieff resolved always to support each other in living a good life, and to try to make everybody happy. He remembered how he had been tempted in Kuzminsky, so that he had begun to regret the house, and the forest, and the farm, and the land, and he asked himself if he regretted them now, and it even seemed strange to think that he could regret them. He remembered all that he had seen today, the woman with the children, and without her husband, who was in prison for having cut down trees in his, Nekhludoff's forest, and the terrible Matrona who considered, or at least talked as if she considered, that women of her position must give themselves to the gentlefolk. He remembered her relation to the babies, the way in which they were taken to the Foundlings' Hospital, and the unfortunate, smiling, wizened baby with the patchwork cap dying of starvation. And then he suddenly remembered the prison, the shaved heads, the cells, the disgusting smells, the chains, and, by the side of it all, the madly lavish city life of the rich, himself included. The bright moon, now almost full, rose above the barn. Dark shadows fell across the yard, and the iron roof of the ruined house shone bright. As if unwilling to waste this light, the nightingales again began their trills. Nekhludoff called to mind how he had begun to consider his life in the garden of Kuzminsky when deciding what he was going to do, and remembered how confused he had become, how he could not arrive at any decision, how many difficulties each question had presented. He asked himself these questions now, and was surprised how simple it all was. It was simple, but he was not thinking now of what would be the results for himself, but only thought of what he had to do. And, strange to say, what he had to do for himself he could not decide, but what he had to do for others he knew without any doubt. He had no doubt that he must not leave Katusha, but go on helping her. He had no doubt that he must study, investigate, clear up, understand all this business concerning judgment and punishment, which he felt he saw differently to other people. What would result from it all he did not know, but he knew for certain that he must do it, and this firm assurance gave him joy. The black cloud had spread all over the sky. The lightning flashed vividly across the yard, and in the old house with its tumble-down porches the thunder growled overhead. All the birds were silent, but the leaves rustled and the wind reached the step where Nekhludoff stood and played with his hair. One drop came down, then another. Then they came drumming on the dock leaves and on the iron of the roof, and all the air was filled by a bright flash, and before Nekhludoff could count three, a fearful crash sounded overhead and spread pealing over all the sky. Nekhludoff went in. Yes, yes, he thought, the work that our life accomplishes, the whole of this work, the meaning of it is not, nor can be, intelligible to me. What were my aunts for? Why did Nikolenka Ertenieff die? Why am I living? What was Katusha for? And my madness? Why that war? Why my subsequent lawless life? To understand it, to understand the whole of the Master's will, is not in my power, but to do his will, that is written down in my conscience, is in my power. That I know for certain, and when I am fulfilling it I have sureness and peace. The rain came down in torrents and rushed from the roof into a tub beneath. The lightning lit up the house and yard less frequently. Nekhludoff went into his room, undressed and lay down, not without fear of the bugs, whose presence the dirty, torn wall-papers made him suspect. Yes, to feel oneself not the master but a servant, he thought, and rejoiced at the thought. His fears were not vain. Hardly had he put out his candle when the vermin attacked and stung him. To give up the land and go to Siberia, fleas, bugs, dirt, ah well, if it must be borne, I shall bear it. But in spite of the best intentions he could not bear it, and sat down by the open window and gazed with admiration at the retreating clouds and the reappearing moon. End of Book 2, Chapter 8.